Greetings, everyone. My name is Graciana, and today I'm here to discuss the workings of the adolescent brain. So, as we begin, I want you to reflect on who you were as a teenager. Were you someone that was a little bit more shy, introverted, preferred to stay at home, or were you someone that was a little bit more outgoing, hanging out with friends that your parents didn't approve of, and doing activities that you legally shouldn't have been allowed to do? Maybe you fell somewhere in between, but regardless, how you identify between the ages of 10 and 19 is most likely not representative of who you are as an adult, and that's because of your brain. As you have aged, your brain has matured and evolved with you, and that is a great biological feature that we could talk about all day long. But I think it's important to go back and reflect on what happened to our brain during adolescence and how that information can help us understand the youth in current day. So, what research tells us is that during adolescence, the brain is going to undergo immense restructuring and rewiring. So, what that means for the individual is that they're going to be very vulnerable to a lot of environmental influences and interpersonal adversity. We're also going to see an increased period of synaptic pruning and myelination. Really, these two processes go hand in hand because synaptic pruning is going to get rid of any significant neural connections for the individual since our brain has a capacity for the amount it can hold, and then the myelination is going to help improve how the brain can communicate internally in terms of speed and efficiency. We're also going to see that the prefrontal cortex is very late to mature in comparison to other regions of the brain, and that's because our brain tends to mature in a broader sense from back to front, and our prefrontal cortex is located right here behind our forehead. And this fixture is known for very important functions such as being able to hold attention, have self-control, and make smart decision making. So this is a large deficit for the adolescent population. We also see that the adolescent population has a hard time finding a balance within this limbic system. The system involves very important figures such as the amygdala and the hypothalamus, but it's overall responsible for how we regulate pleasure, motivation, and emotions overall. So, again, another deficit for the adolescent population. And lastly, the cerebral cortex. This is the outermost layer of your brain, and we see a huge decrease in volume, specifically in the parietal lobe, which is responsible for storing your sensory experiences. This is not inherently a bad thing. It is just a sign that due to synaptic pruning and the myelination occurring at this time, that the brain is on a healthy development, which is a good thing. So I believe that this information is important for how we interact with the world and within the justice system, which is my field of study, and four main pillars. So the first pillar is connection. We're going to have a deeper and more humane connection with our adolescent population. We're going to be able to better communicate with them about their needs and their desires. We're going to be able to innovate social policy and the current rules and regulations that we have on this population. And we're going to be able to prosper as a human species and keep evolving. So my personal interest, it starts with being a teenager once myself, as you were, and I believe teenagers are forced to live in this paradox of being so misunderstood, but then being highly condemned for their actions. I also want to be a parent of my own one day, so I know that means I have to become a mother to teenagers, so I hope this education helps in that sense. And then in terms of my degree and my career aspirations, the juvenile justice system has evolved greatly, but more work needs to be done. And I believe that's going to start with fusing in adolescent brain science into its current practices. And then in terms of my future career, which is either going to be in law enforcement or into probation, I believe that, I may work with this population and I want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. I want to work with them, not against them. So, some key findings about our youth and the juvenile justice system overall. We know that the youth population is currently 22% of the entire population right now, and it is expected to grow within the next 3 decades. What that means for us, this problem of delinquency and not fusing in brain science is not going away anytime soon. We also know from self reports, such as Monitoring the Future study, which is specifically looking at adolescent behavior, we see that over half of all high school seniors will partake in alcohol, illicit substances, or risky activities before the age of 18. So we see their brain vulnerability at play right here. We also see that a little bit over 500,000 delinquency cases are brought to juvenile justice court, and most of those cases, 85%, are going to be by law enforcement. So if law enforcement could start fusing the science into their work, then hopefully we can start to bring down this number. And lastly, one key takeaway is that no adolescent child is exempt from the effects of the juvenile justice system. They could be a victim or the perpetrator, but delinquency comes from all walks of life. The one common factor that all these kids share is that they have an underdeveloped brain. So I believe this is important for you to know because one, the juvenile justice system needs your feedback about what it can improve on. When you look at your profession through those rose-colored glasses, you're not getting the full picture. So having public feedback is very valuable. I also believe that more youth are going to be inappropriately punished for their underdeveloped brain if we don't have the public advocating on their behalf. They simply don't have a voice right now. And lastly, fields adjacent to criminal justice could largely benefit from incorporating this brain science into their work. So if criminal justice starts it, hopefully other institutions could follow suit. And if that means you work in those fields, hopefully you would follow in those footsteps. So I believe once we start fusing adolescent brain science into the juvenile justice system, we should see these impacts. And it starts with more diversion options away from formal criminalization, meaning that they don't enter the system, fewer adolescents in secure facilities, the introduction of innovative and evidence-based treatment and practices, and overall reduced recidivism rates, which means that once they are out of our system, they stay out of it and they're not in the revolving door. So I want this to end us on where do we go from here? And a little call to action. And I believe it starts with giving our youth a little bit more grace. They're under constant scrutiny over their actions, and I believe they would benefit from our compassion. I also think that the justice system needs to work with the delinquent youth and not against them, knowing that they have an underdeveloped brain. Also, the public must continue to advocate for adolescent needs across all social institutions, not just the justice system. And lastly, the adolescent population is going to make mistakes, but these moments should not define their worth in society. Their brain is just simply developing. Yeah, that is all for me. Thank you guys.